We've been open since September, so it hasn't been very long. And before we started, the MOPS ministry was a big thing that we wanted to have happen here, just because we, as we did the research, we thought this could be a great way to care for people and minister to people. So I will tell you that the team that works on the MOPS ministry just does a bang up job. Tons of effort put into this to make sure things really run well. So I get to kind of peek behind the curtain to see what's happening every once in a while, and it's just a fantastic team. So I've been at Bethany since 2003. I was a grad student at UNH. I was a member there, and my wife Jenny and I we were friends, and we attended, and then we started dating, and we attended. And the Greenland campus was big enough. We said if it doesn't work out, we'll just sit on opposite sides of the sanctuary. But it did work out. And then in 2007, I invited Pastor Bruce, who's the senior pastor, to come speak at a retreat for a ministry I was working with at University of New Hampshire. And then after the retreat was over, he said, "Have you ever thought about working at a church?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Do you ever think about working with students?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Do you want me to take you out to lunch?" And I said, "Absolutely." So that started my relationship professionally with Bethany Church. So Jenny and I got married. We were married for 13 years, got 2 kids. Stella is 8 and Hudson's 4. We have 2 rescue dogs, Griffin and Caroline. Live in New Hampshire, over in Newmarket, but I'm originally from New York City, just outside New York City, Poughkeepsie, New York, about an hour north there. So when Tanya and I were talking, she said it would be that the topic for today would be friendship. And so I've been thinking about that a lot, and I think it's really interesting to talk about this topic in relation to the holidays, because this is a season, right, where when you look from the outside into people's lives, sometimes it seems like everybody has it buttoned up, and then you feel like you don't. But just so you know, everybody is looking at you, feeling like you have it buttoned up, and they don't. But it's an interesting time to think about friendships and connecting with people, because it can feel like this is the time when it's supposed to happen, and if it doesn't, the letdown can be really significant. We actually have a ministry that we run at Bethany Church called Surviving the Holidays for that reason, because it can be a season when there's such great expectations for bonding and relationships, and when it doesn't happen, it can just be a really big struggle. So as I was thinking about this, so let my nerd side come out a little bit. So when you study the Greek, when you look at what the Bible, in the New Testament of the Bible, it's written in Greek, and there's words that we have one word for that they have multiple words for. So like the word love, we have the word love. And so I say I love my wife and I love pizza, right? It's the same word. But we would all hope I don't mean the same thing, obviously, right? Whereas in Greek, they have 4 different words. And friendship is an interesting word, because I was thinking about this last night. Like, I have a friend whose name is Nate. And Nate and I used to be neighbors. And my wife, Jenny, and his wife, Tracy, become pretty good friends. They moved down to Connecticut a handful of years ago. And she, every couple months, she'll drive down, or Tracy will drive up. They'll spend time together. But if you said, "Who is Nate?" I would say, "Nate's a friend of mine." But Nate and I don't talk. We don't Facebook. We don't text. But if you said, "Is he a friend?" I would say, "Yeah." And if you say, "Well, is he really a friend?" I might say, "Well, no, he's a buddy." But like, what does that even mean, right? So Jenny and Tracy are friends, and they may be really close friends. And Nate and I are friends, but we're not really the same type of friends, right? So we use this word kind of generically. I was thinking about Pastor John, who's the pastor over at Raymond. Like, Pastor John and I, we don't really hang out outside of work, but we get along really well. We enjoy time together. We encourage one another. But outside of work, just because of life and stuff, we don't spend time together. So I'm like, is he a work friend? Is he like, how do we think about what friendship is, right? And it's interesting when you think about how we use the word friends, because it's used the same way. And I feel like the one qualifier that we have in our culture is we say this person's my best friend. Right? But I find this interesting, particularly with students I used to work with, college students and probably younger, is that I find like the word best friend comes up a lot. Or like, "Oh, she's totally my best friend." And I'm like, you literally just met 20 minutes ago. Like, how is this your best friend, right? So even that is a word. I'm like, what does it really mean to be a friend to somebody? So I want to talk to you today about 4 kinds of friendship, just to get you thinking about maybe different categories. But first, I want to make the case for the importance of friendship, because I find many young parents, it can turn out that their friend groups start to go like this because life can just be so busy, right? And so your friend becomes your spouse, your sister, your mother, your brother, like people who are really immediately close to you. But when you say like, who are your friends? There are people who are just kind of like, I don't have connections outside because life is just so hectic. And so I was thinking about what's the importance of friendship, because if it doesn't really matter, then we're wasting our time. But here's a couple things to think about. First, you are a multifaceted person, right? You're not just one thing, right? As you think about, I was thinking about this for myself, like when I bump into people out and about, usually it's like, hey, Pastor Tim, or hey, Pastor, right? I do have people when they find out that I work at a church, they're like, hello, Father. And I'm like, so, which is always weird when it's somebody who's significantly older than you, because I'm always like, oh, hello to you, you know? Like, but they have a category of how they think about me. But right, so I'm a pastor, I have a job. I'm also, like on a certain Sunday, I could be the pastor but not the preacher, but some Sundays I'm the pastor and the preacher. And then I'm a father, and I'm a friend, and I'm a brother. I like the outdoors, so I guess I'm an outdoorsman. So there's a variety of people within my one person. It's the same for you. And friendships allow us to have those different things drawn out of us. Right? If I just spend time with my friends who do things in the outdoors, then they just draw that side out of me. But we're multifaceted people, so we need people to draw the different parts out of us. So that's one thing. Because we're multifaceted, these people allow us to live out, explore the different aspects of who we are. Here's the second thing. It frees your spouse, or perhaps mother, sister, father, from being the one person who's your resource in times of need. If you have like one close person, your spouse, and we'll talk about the role of the spouse, I think, in friendship, but a spouse, mother, father, sometimes when life hits the fan and everything gets tough, you've got one person that you're constantly going to. And right, doesn't life happen in these seasons where you're like things are cruising smoothly and then it all goes sideways, and maybe it's a long stretch, and that's putting a burden on just one person to carry that load with you, right? And so having a variety of friendships allow you to kind of spread the burden, and that's good for them and it's good for you as well. Third, friendships give you perspective on your life that one person can't give. So having a variety of friends or people in your life gives you different perspective. I don't know if you've seen that picture of, it's a cartoon of two characters, I think they're men standing, and there's the number 6 or the number 9 in between them, right? So one guy's standing like this, it looks like a 6. The guy over here is standing, it looks like a 9 because it's a 6 upside down. And this guy is saying, it's a 9. He's saying, it's a 6, it's a 9, it's a 6, because they only have one perspective, right? And you as the outsider looking in say, it's actually depends on what side you're standing from. And that's true in life. Like if we just have one perspective, when a challenge comes up in my life and I offer an idea and I say, what do you think about this? If my friend is the only friend I talk to, the only person I talk to, they offer one perspective. But what if I have 2 or 3 people who can give me perspective, and then they have a little discussion, we talk, and now I've got a new perspective on whatever the issue might come up, right? So a variety of perspectives into your life. How about on a super pragmatic level? According to doctors, friendships improve life. Right? That's just like the statistics, the research shows it. So I was digging into this. Better brain health, better lifestyle choices, faster recovery from sickness, better mental health, better dealing with stress. All this to say people who have friendships live longer and happier lives. And this goes down to even a really simple level with people who have pets. When they can handle the pets, actually there's a better lifespan, a healthier lifespan. So that's another one. And then I'll just give you the last one, which on a spiritual church level, we're made, when we read the Bible, we see that God in the Christian faith is not this singular being. He's the Trinity. It's Father, Son, and Spirit. And so God, in his very nature, is a community. The Father is interacting with the Spirit's interacting with the Son. They're all in this relationship together. And so by the nature of how we're created, that we are marked by the image of our Creator, we're made to be connected to other people and not just one person. It's interesting that the Trinity it's not just the Father and Son, it's 3. So you have this dynamic relationship between a variety of people and relationship. So I heard this great quote from C.S. Lewis. He said, friendship is unnecessary, like philosophy, like art, like the universe itself, for God did not need to create. It has no survival value. Rather, it is one of those things that gives value to survival. So you can get by without friends. It's just that it's pretty miserable if you do. Right? So there's kind of a deeper place that God's calling us to as the people he's made humans to be. So I want to talk about these 4 types of friendships just to get you thinking about who do I have in my life who fits into these categories, and maybe what does it look like to pursue people within the different categories. As I share this may be weird for you to hear, but I hope this will give you freedom to know that you don't need to be friends with everybody. And it's a weird thing, like to say that even like as a pastor in the church world, some people are like, oh my goodness, like, but you do. But you don't. That's just the reality. Now, sometimes when you say something like that, what people hear is, you don't have to be friends with everybody. And what they hear is, I don't have to be friends with everybody, ... so I can be mean to people. That's not what I said, right? It's just that we don't have time and the effort enough to be friends with every person. And sometimes we feel this necessity to be like, well, I need to be kind and reach out to everybody. And with phones and with texting and with all the options to connect with people, we feel the sense of like, well, I should shoot a text to that person. Well, I should message this person. Well, I should email that person. And then all your friendships, you have 10,000 of them, but they're all this deep, as opposed to having really deep and meaningful relationships. I was thinking back to when I was a grad student at the University of New Hampshire, and the group I was involved in, the Christian Fellowship group, before I came on staff with them, it was probably about maybe 18, 20 people. And so it was a small enough group that when somebody in the group did something, everybody had to be invited, right? So it's like, I'm going to the dining hall. So everybody got an invite. I'm going to the dining hall at 5:30. And there was this one young woman, so I was 24 when I came to grad school. This one young woman, I think she was probably maybe 20. Her name was Janessa, really nice young lady, but like she and I just did not connect. Like if we sat next to one another at a meal, the conversation was minimal. It's not that I didn't like her, she didn't like me. I was just kind of like, we're different. She was like, yep, and we were okay with it. Didn't mean I didn't like her, it just meant that I'm going to connect with somebody else more than her, right? And so that's kind of how life works. I do think it's interesting because when you do some of the research, there's a different way that women live this out as opposed to men live this out, okay? And this is like based on the research. This is not Tim's thoughts I was driving in, like the research says this. And I remember actually some of that research played out years ago when Oprah still had her television show. And she talked about the fact that women can have this subtext of guilt and like I have to be kind and reach out to everybody, such that when they bumped into inanimate objects at home, they apologize to things. Now you may be like, that's funny. Oh no, he knows my story. But I'm just telling you, like, that's what the research says. And like, I remember Oprah having this doctor and sharing about it and like watching the camera look at the women in the audience and no one was like, really? They were like, oh my goodness, I do that, right? And so this idea that we don't need to be friends with everybody, we can still be kind to everybody. But what do those different types of friendships look like? So here's the first one. The first one is friends I know of. Okay, it's friends I know. These are people who you see around. You can have a simple, basic level conversation with them, but it doesn't go really deep. And we all have people like that in our lives, and we need to be okay with having people at that level, like friends I know of, right? If I asked you about that person, you would say he, she, they're nice enough, right? When you talk to them, you say, hey, how are you? They say, good, how are you? And you say, good. Even if it was the worst day of like the whole year, you don't go like, oh, it was a really terrible day. You just say good, they say good, and you kind of move on. I don't know if you've noticed this, but like people joke around about how we talk about the weather, like when we don't have anything to talk about. It's like a real thing. Like when you don't have anything to talk about, you're like, whoa, all this rain. People are like, yeah. And like that's as far as it goes, right? Or the other thing is like, this is when you're standing by the elevator with somebody who you don't know, who's kind of at this level. You give them the elevator eyes, right? You stand, and then you go. And that communicates, I have nothing to say to you. You don't have anything to say to me, but we're going to be kind to one another. You get on the elevator, you stand, you press the button, and what do? You don't stand like this and say, so how's your day? You stand and you look at the numbers, right? Like in this building, there's like 3 floors, so it's not like you're like, well, what floor am I going to? It's not, but we just don't interact because these are just people I know of. So I was thinking about this for me. My neighbor across the street in Newmarket, Peter, super nice guy, really friendly. His kids cross the street in the morning to wait for the bus with my daughter Stella. He comes across sometimes, his wife comes across sometimes, but we talk, shoot the breeze for about 5 minutes, and like that is it. There's no deep conversation. He goes back to his life, I go back to mine. There's no animosity, but it's just not really deep. Right, so this is a friend I know of. Like we interact a little bit. Nice guy, but generally we're ships passing in the night. Here's the second level. The second level is friends who know me. So one is friends I know of, kind of a distant relationship, but we're cordial. Friends who know me. These are people who know something more about me. Right, they know something a little bit deeper about who I am and what's going on in my life. Maybe you shared some personal information with them. They've seen you in a struggle. They've seen you in a success or failure. They know a portion of your life, but the reality is they probably don't know all of your life. And they're also the type of people who God brings into your life for a season. Right? So you have friends for a while, and then you part ways, and you may look and go, man, I wish we stayed in touch, but it doesn't keep you up at night. You're like, that would have been really cool if we stayed connected, but it kind of is what it is. I had a friend in college. In college, my was a coworker, he was a roommate, we lived in the same apartment, whose name was Bill. So we played sports together, we were in classes together, we started the outdoor club at Ithaca together, we went camping together, we were RAs together, we did a lot of stuff together, and we don't talk anymore. And it's not because he got angry at me or I got angry at him, we just don't stay in touch. He lives in Buffalo, New York. Like, every once in a while, I'm like, I wonder what Bill is up to. And I'll get on Google, and I'll be like, Bill Roberts. He's a principal at a high school now. If I was in Buffalo and he was walking downtown and we saw each other, I'd be like, oh my goodness, Bill. And he'd give me a hug. I'd give him a hug. Let's get dinner. We get dinner. And then we probably would say, dude, we have to stay in touch. But we wouldn't. And he wouldn't call me in a couple weeks and say, why didn't you stay in touch with me? Just kind of, that's the season that we had, and we're okay with it, right? So he knows me, I know him, but it doesn't go on forever. The third type of friendship are the friends who mold me. These are the people who actually shape who I am. And this type of friendship, it's going to impact your life in a significant way. These are people who you've allowed into your life. They have influence on you. And I want to note here that in the ideal world, these are the right people. But based on life circumstances, sometimes we have people who are in that level of friendship who are molding me, who are toxic. So it forces us to do some assessment and say, like, this person has big influence on my life, but should that person have big influence on my life? Right? That's a challenging question for us to think through, but it's true nonetheless. So, when you think about those types of relationships, whether it's on the positive side or the negative side, the question we ask is, what kind of person is this friend helping me become? Because they're shaping you into a new type of person. Every time you interact with this person, because it's at a deeper level, they're molding you to who you're going to be in the future. You've probably seen some good things from them, you've seen some not good things, and they've seen the same for you, and yet you've kept the friendship alive. These type of people, I heard this a couple years ago, and it was so helpful. These type of people, they say, for that circle of friendships, look at the 5 closest people to you, and you're going to be the median of those 5. So think about the 5 closest people to you, and you're probably in the middle. Like, here's 2 people, you're like, they're in my life, but they're not great. They're in my life, they're awesome. You're this person right in the middle, because they have the most influence on your day-to-day life. You're the median of those 5 people closest to you. Now, if you're married, the goal is that this person is your spouse, that you would have that type of bond and that connection with your spouse. That's not true for every one of us, but it can be true. And that's a work in progress to actually get to that point where that's actually true for your marriage. But there are people I think it's necessary to have outside of just your marriage to be another person. Jesus uses this analogy when he's teaching in his hometown. He says the prophet or the speaker has no honor in his hometown. And he's basically saying when you're in your common space where everybody knows you, they're like, oh yeah, that's just Jesus. He's the carpenter's son. You go to another town and all of a sudden it's Jesus. He's the miracle worker. And that's not just like a Jesus thing, that's like a human thing, right? Haven't you said something to somebody you know, like it makes total sense? And they're like, yeah, I don't know. And then someone else comes along and says the same thing, and they're like, this person's so smart. And you're like... So, and I'm telling you, it's God keeps pastors humble by doing that, right? Like you preach the message, and somebody comes up. Like there was it was probably a year ago. It was a year ago in one sermon series, like in 4 weeks, 2 different things. A guy came up to me after the sermon, and he said, when you pray, man, I really feel like you're talking to God. And I said, wow, I am. Thank you. That's the goal, right? But it was like an emotive thing for me. And then without missing a beat, he went, but when you preach, man, I don't know, I just don't feel it. And I was like, fair enough. So those are the people that when you see them walk down the aisle the next time, you're like, can someone talk to him? Because I don't know. The same sermon series with a different sermon, but I was talking about loving people well. And my wife despises snakes, like a garter snake, like a fake snake, like a piece of string that might be a snake. That freaks her out, right? So I was talking about loving her would not be like bringing home a pet snake, even if it wasn't for her. It'd be like, look, I got this for the kids. That would not be loving. And so that was like this much of this sermon. And this lady came like barreling down the aisle after the sermon with this big smile on her face. And I'm like, we've changed her life, Jesus. Look what we've done. And she came up and like with totally engaged. She looked at me and she said, my son travels to Africa and takes pictures of snakes all the time. And that was it, right? I'm telling you, like when you put your sermon together, you're like, this is a really good joke, but people are going to get lost in the joke, and at the end they're going to be like, that was a really good joke. You're like, totally missed the sermon, right? But here's my point in saying this, is that like when we interact with people, we have different expectations. When that guy came and said that to me, like it stung a little bit, but I was like, it is what it is. If people in my closest circle came and said that to me, it's a whole different level. Right? And so God keeps us humble by knowing that people who are really intimately connected to us, like our spouse, sometimes they can't hear us in the same way that someone who's outside can. Like, so God wants us to not just have one person who's that close friend who, as I'm saying, who molds me, but we should have multiple people. So God's given me a gift in that I have a handful of guys that I connected with at UNH who are those people to me. So I wear this ring, this is my wedding ring, and then I wear this ring over here. So this is my ring that 4 other guys and I connected when I was at UNH, and our original group was about probably 12. And then it just shrunk down, and 5 of us were left. And so one of the guys' dad said, so you guys are the faithful 5. And we're like, yes. So we got rings made, and we had etched into the rings the words pistos pente, which in Greek is faithful 5. And so these are guys that we just have a thread on Facebook. And it's like, I texted my friend Jay last night and said, hey man, I'm praying for you because he's got a big job situation coming up. He said, are you free to talk? I said, well, I'm about to walk into the house. It's second shift. And he said, I'm on my way to the grocery store and then home for second shift. So no, we can't connect. But he wasn't like, why didn't you call me? It was like, we'll connect when we connect, right? But these are people who are constantly speaking to my life. They're people I can ask questions of. They'll give me really honest feedback. And I can push back, and then they'll push back against me. And I know that their intention for me is good. It's never like, I'm really trying to hurt you. I'm saying these things because I think there's good behind it. And so this is my wife. These are my closest friends. And then for me, I found over the years getting a mentor was a huge deal. And my experience with mentors, for what it's worth, is that you don't get the value of it until you get it. Like when I said to people, hey, you should get a mentor, they're like, yeah, that's fine. And then they get a mentor, like, this is amazing. And I'm like, that was my exact same experience. To get someone who's further down the road, who can speak back into your life. And so my mentor is a retired pastor from up in Maine. And so I'll sit down with him sometimes, and I'll be like, and I'm just, we'll be forthright with you guys here. I'll be like, Rick, Bruce is making me crazy this week. He's making me insane. And I'll be like, tell me about it. And so I'll tell him, and he'll say, put on the, like, I'm your friend mentor hat, and he'll say, I could see why that would make you crazy. And then he'll take that hat off and say, but as someone who was a pastor for 40 years, maybe he's doing that because of this reason. And I'm like, can we take that hat off and can we just be friends? But he's able to give me that perspective, right? So he's someone who's shaping and molding me. He encourages me as I walk out life. So challenging me, encouraging me, loves me, speaks truth into my life. Those types of friends who mold us. And so, part of the challenge is to look around and say, of those first 3, do I have a lot of people at maybe level 1 and nobody at level 2 or 3? Do I have people across those spectrums? Because really what we're looking for in our lives are some of those deeper, more meaningful friendships. Let me tell you the last one. The last one is the one friend who made me, and one and friend are capitalized. Because all these friendships with all the benefits, there's one friendship that's greater than them all, and that's we were made for friendship with God. And when you hear that, you might say to yourself, like, that seems weird because I can connect this way. Like my buddy Nathan, I could call him up and say, hey, I got a week off. Do you want to drive to California? And he'd be like, let's go. And we'd have a great time because it's this human to human connection. But let's be honest, aren't there times, whether it's with your spouse, your closest friend, whoever, that you want to connect and you're trying to find the words to express what's going on in your heart, and that person's like, yeah, that sounds really tough. And you're like, I know you get it to a certain level, maybe more than most, but you just don't get it, right? I was thinking about that, and it's interesting. Like, I'm at a life stage now when I start using movie quotes, and like half the group is like, yeah, and the other half is like, I don't know that movie at all. So I don't know if you remember the movie Jerry Maguire with Tom Cruise, but when he comes to the door and says, you complete me, and like everyone's like, oh, and I'm like, boo, because it's a total lie. That humans were never made to be completed by another human. And I'm not trying to like burst your bubble and make you sad, but I'm trying to prepare you that when you're like, this person doesn't seem to perfectly understand me and interact with me, yeah, it's because that's a broken person and you're a broken person. And so you have broken person 1 plus broken person 2 equals everything's perfect. That's bad math. God has given us the gift of other people in our lives, but there's this one true friend who knows us completely in such a way that I can say something to God and he never goes, really? I have no hesitation to say, hey, God, here's the real deal. He's like, I know, I was just waiting for you to say it. So years ago, when Jenny and I were living in Nottingham, so we bought our house like right at the downturn of the economy. Like literally maybe a week before we were about to close, our real estate agent called, our mortgage broker called, and he said, I have good news and bad news. He said, your loan's fine. He said, but I want to tell you overnight, 95% of your type of loans have disappeared. And I got off the phone, and I was like, this guy's crazy, man. Like, that didn't happen. And I turned on the news, and I'm like, wow, that happened, right? So we lived in Nottingham for a couple years, and then we decided to sell the house because Jenny was going to be staying home with Stella and to move. And so we tried to sell it with an agent. That didn't work. We tried to sell it. Somebody was about to close on it, and they found, a spot like this big in a crawl space, a tiny little bit of mold, and they were like, nope, we're not doing it. Like, I could have gone like this, and it would have been gone. And they backed out, and then we tried to sell it on our own. Then we got another agent. And so I was really frustrated because for me, I was like, this is an obligation. Like, we signed a contract that said we're going to pay the bill, and I don't want to put us in a bad situation. And I was out driving around one day, and I was praying about this, and I was saying, God, this is why it's frustrating. We're trying to do the right thing, and I don't understand where you are in this. And I mean, it was 45 minutes of me just ranting. And I can tell you where I was on Route 152 by the power lines, crossing a stream, when I said to God, I just feel like if this house doesn't sell, you're going to be disappointed in me. And like the words came out of my mouth, and I went, oh. And it took me 45 minutes to get to that point, and it was like just this tiny, still small voice saying, okay, now we're having the real conversation. Because I had to get all the other stuff out, and then God was like, so that's the issue. And I was like, oh, that's the issue. But he wasn't, when I said that to him, he wasn't like, oh, that's what's going on. Like, he knew, right? And there's a freedom in having a friendship like that with a being who knows all your stuff and is still for you. And when I was looking through the Bible, there's multiple examples of people using the phrase friendship with God. The book of Isaiah, the book of James describe Abraham as a friend of God. Not just like he knows him, but like he has a friendship with him. So let me offer you those four. So you have the friends who you kind of know. There's the friends that know you. There's the friends that mold you. And then there's the one friend who made you. And so part of the opportunity here is that you have a chance to build all those types of friendships. Really, we're aiming for those last two, right? Those friends who you can really connect to and can mold you. So friendship matters. There's these different kinds of friends. And where do you go from here? So let me close with these three thoughts. My first thought would be that friendships aren't found, friendships are made. And we kind of know that instinctually, but I hear people talk about that. I feel particularly some of the younger generation, they say, like, it's hard for me to find community. I say, well, that's your problem. You're trying to find it instead of make it. You need to put in the effort, right? And it's hard. And can we just be honest that sometimes you put in the effort and it's not given back, and that's heartbreaking. To say, like, I really like this person, they don't feel the same way about me. And I'm not talking about dating, I'm talking about just friendships. But we have to put in the effort if we want to actually make friends. So you have to invest in friendships in order for them to work. Second thing is that this is a place where you can grow those top two levels of friendships. And I stand firmly on the place of saying the local church is the hope of the world because it offers friendship with one another and friendship with God. That's what the church is here for. And here's the last thing I'll say to you, is that even this morning and the mornings you've been here, is that you're not here on accident. The friend-making God is in pursuit of you and in pursuit of bringing you to other people. And so there are no coincidences. And so just think about that. As you leave here, I hope that thought bounces around the back of your head. This is not an accident that I'm here. God wants to actually do something in my friendships this way and my friendship with him this way. All right, let me pray for you guys, and then you'll have your small talk. God, thank you for this chance to be here together. I'm thankful for the opportunity to share with these guys. I do pray that your truth would stick. God, if there's anything that's pointless or not helpful from what I've shared, that you would just wipe it from all of our memories, mine too, God. And what is true and what's of you and what's helpful, that you would let it stick. And I do pray, God, that we would have the courage, myself included again, that we'd have the courage to examine our lives, to look at our friendships and relationships, and ask some questions about who is influencing me, who is molding me. Am I being shaped into the person that I truly want to become, God, that you want me to become? And I do pray that through this group and through other connections that are made here, that new and beautiful and life-giving friendships would be formed. So thank you for the opportunity to do that. Thank you that you're in our midst as we're in that process. We pray in your name. Amen.